points where we might need the most help, we don't necessarily have the capacity, resource, tools, skill, energy to ask for that support, to recognize what it is that we need, and to feel courageous enough to actually invite others into a space of cooperation and collaboration. And it can often be after the fact, where there has been enough recovery or stabilization around a kind of shutdown or collapse to move into then a space where there is enough availability to then see, okay, the next stage here requires some additional support, or it needs some input, it needs some guidance, there needs to be some frameworks to make this process easier. And the thing about that is that that also takes time, and it also requires energy. This sense of trying to bridge into a space of connection where we are actually acknowledging a vulnerability or a challenge, and we move into a space where we extend this request for assistance, and then there's a requirement of trying to maintain or hold this quality of receptiveness and openness to actually receive, and for that to be able to be held sufficiently long enough that there can be a recognition of the forms of support that come in and whether they are resonant, whether they actually meet that need, but also that we don't block that blessing of support. We don't actually retract and retreat and then kind of come back into ourselves where there is actually an inability to clearly recognize when the offer of support is there, and to actually be able to meet it and acknowledge it and explore it, even if it is tentatively. And so this process then of collaboration and dialogue, and walking step by step and putting things in place, it does take time, and then it can take more time, and that doesn't have to be a heavy pressure and weight if there is also a quality of forward looking where one can acknowledge, okay, this is laying a foundation for future resourcing and future development, because not everything is plain sailing, not everything is easy, not everything is accessible, and life does throw challenges at you as well. So when you have spent the time putting those frameworks in place and building that peer support, professional support network, whatever other avenues of support might be required, those things are there. You also have an understanding of how you respond to those, what you are receptive to, what works for you, what resonates with your temperament, your unique set of circumstances, your life experience, your trajectory, where you're trying to go, what you're trying to achieve. And there's something very assuring and very comforting in knowing that even though something might have taken a little longer to put in place, that is there, that creates an anchor point, that creates something tangible that can be returned to, maybe not for yourself in that immediate future, but also for the benefit of others. Often, when we recognize that support in an area is required, and we're still in this phase of not actually being supported by the capacity to ask, then finding out information, doing research, making yourself aware of what's available, this can all feel really overwhelming. Basic tasks, things that you kind of take for granted when you are in a good place, a stable place, a connected place, an open, receptive, inquisitive place, can all be really, really heavy mud to wade through when you're not feeling supported, you're not feeling grounded, you're not feeling your best. And once you have traversed through that landscape and, pulled yourself out of that proverbial mud, there is something in this ability to recognize other people in that space. There is a synonymity, there is something about the way that someone chooses to express something or how they describe a challenge or struggle that activates, stimulates memory, stimulates this sense of, I have been there, I know what that feels like, I feel really where you are and where you're coming from. And that ability to recognize and identify can be an absolute lifeline for other people, because you then have gone through a process where you have understood where the possible intersections are. You have a roadmap that is specific to you, and it might not be completely translatable to that person, but you certainly have signposts, you certainly have tools and skills and resources that you have developed through that challenge, that period of development and growth and resilience building, that can transfer, that can be anchor points to offer someone else. And so in that sense, the idea of investing time, energy, resource into really, really making sure that the support systems that you have around you are built to last and also built for purpose, the impact of that goes beyond you as an individual, not least from the point of view that if you are better resourced, if you are more stable, if you are more supported, the quality of assistance that you can extend to others, or the quality of presence that you can provide to others in whatever your role is, or be that in your community, your family, your workplace, but then also from the point of view that you have a framework, you have a system there which helps to kind of consolidate an understanding of how different systems interact with each other, how they intersect, what the language of these different systems are, because that is one of the main barriers I feel that is so common in people being able to really access the support that they need, whether that's in a health context, whether it's personal development, whether it's education. There's a language barrier. It's like you can't necessarily receive the assistance that you really need if you don't have the language available to you to be able to articulate your needs. And if you are coming to that expression from a place that feels already disempowered, maybe very disengaged, in fact, disillusioned with the process, that maybe because there is not a cohesive communication exchange of mutual understanding, that you actually time and time again face a barrier or a knockback or an expectation that's not met because there's something lost in translation, or that articulation doesn't reach the person that could be that source of support. So when you build your own systems and frameworks to aid your own processes, you learn the language of all of these different external pieces, but then you also develop almost like a meta language or something else that becomes adaptive and responsive, but also fluid and able to meet all of these different areas in a way that is kind of inviting cohesion, inviting understanding. And I think this is the key in the sense of empowered asks for support, being able to step into a space where you're able to harness from these tools and frameworks of support, and then actually begin to shift the way that you articulate for yourself and identify what your needs are. And this takes time. It's not necessarily an easy process. It can be greatly aided by a kind of, I don't want to say chance or luck, because but circumstantial, that you might find the right person at the right time working in a specific department that you really need to draw on resource from, and that person might just be exactly that energy activation, or that person that holds space long enough for you to come to an understanding of something in your own way, in your own time. It might be somebody that just offers you a little nudge or a bit of encouragement or a bit of support, sufficient enough for you to feel really seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that piece and the kind of inherent therapeutic nature of that piece goes back into your reflexive communication and feeds back into your sense of trust about, I can express what I need and I do understand what works for me and I am allowed to ask for support. And this then kind of creates a nourishing feedback loop, which then pulls into or overflows into this space of like blended learning and blended language and meaning making, so that the more you're working in this kind of space where there's an understanding that support frameworks they need to be multidisciplinary and they need to be holistic in order to actually operate from a person-centered focus and a trauma-informed focus, that there can be an exchange and crossover and like fusion, and therefore like a blossoming of new ideas or concepts or things that like create bridges and they create intersection, because I mean, if we can't do that, if we can't work in this way that is pushing that boundary in a sense of inviting partnership and communication and collaboration from spaces that seem like they're disparate or unrelated, but that actually there's also this acknowledgement that the two could really learn from each other. There actually might be a completely new development or system or tool that comes out of a marriage of two or more influences, and especially if this focus or emphasis is around what can we do to improve support, what can we do to improve care, what can we do to enhance relationship and trust building, and how can we work in a responsive way that is tailored to the individual. These are all questions that I think can be more easily addressed with curiosity and creative problem solving if we create spaces for lots of different voices to kind of all come to sit at the same table and actually explore with each other. And there might be a specific focus or direction of travel that is kind of guiding that conversation. But if the intention is set in a way that is, inherently positive and in a spirit of collaboration, then I think amazing things can happen. So I've kind of gone on a few routeways here, but coming back to this idea of, and I think I've said this before, like no time spent or invested in building your support frameworks in your personal life, in your professional life, is wasted, not least for yourself and those that you immediately are in your environment and the impact that you can make on them, but also for others. Because, if we're doing things solely in this vein of this is only for my use, it limits the growth and it limits the potential, and it limits that sense of actually I can do something that is infused with my energy and my intention and my way of understanding or working and moving in the world, but I can also do it in service to others and in service to a kind of much bigger, far-reaching purpose that allows there to be a level of impact that can create support for other people, and that doesn't have to look like, as it so often can be painted as, a kind of self-sacrifice or struggle. It's more so in the implementation and the documentation and the continued conversation about, these are some things that I've explored, these are the resources that I worked with, this is the kind of framework or system that has emerged or been born out of this process. I think there's potential here for this to be a useful pathway or approach for others. Let's talk about it, or who wants to collaborate on this, or who wants to take this to the next level and make it into something that can be implemented across the board or in different spaces that would really, really benefit from it. And the point being that at that stage, your capacity and resourcing ability is sufficient enough for you to have energy to be able to really offer in service without that being a burden or a weight or a sense of obligation. It's like coming from a place of, I now have a bit more breathing space. I now have a bit more, creative energy available to me because, I got the help that I needed, kind of thing. And I see how valuable this is, and like, how can we make that accessible to others with a kind of invitation. So yeah, those are rainy day thoughts today, and I'd love to hear what is sparking from that reflection for you based on your own support frameworks and what they look like in your personal life and your professional life. Maybe you already have a team around you, and that is so fortunate and so nourishing to have that. But we can create team and we can create community in a variety of ways, and it doesn't have to look, there isn't like a cookie cutter formula for that. And I'm always interested to hear in international perspectives as well, people that are working in kind of institutional spaces, educational organizations, community organizations, because there are really novel, interesting approaches to facilitating conversations like these, and we all have something of value to share with each other. So hoping that crossover and exchange can support us in the next phase of creating support structures that serve for the good of all.